Thank you, Donna.
I don't need a microphone. Donna asked me to tell you the 20-year history of our Compeer program in 20 minutes or less. Wow. I accepted Donna's challenge and decided to include my own recovery story because our journey into Compeer really started in my childhood. Can I do it? That would be 75 years in 20 minutes. Here goes. Fasten your seatbelts. When I served as the Compeer program director from 1991 to 2014, people in mental health recovery used to ask me, "Are you that Compeer guy?" Well, I'm here today to tell you, yes, I am. I'm that Compeer guy. Today, I will talk from my heart to your heart. At the age of nearly 75, I've come to realize that I'm an adult survivor of childhood trauma. I will tell you about some difficult experiences that shaped the adult I became. I will tell you specific consequences of my trauma. I'll describe how favorable mentoring relationships, therapy, spirituality, and other positive influences enabled me to always find compelling reasons to want to go on living, rather than choosing to end my life. I will tell you how I gradually acquired and sustained resilience needed to bounce back and become successful in work in family roles, putting my traumatic lived experiences behind me. This prepared me for Compeer, my life's work. As the youngest of 3 brothers, 4 years apart with no sisters, I lived with shame, embarrassment, and fear that went with having our mother struggling to cope with her manic depression, now known as bipolar disorder. There were no effective medications to help her back then, so my mother's struggle was heroic, to say the least. Ice cold baths, sedation, and electroshock therapy were common treatments back then. I did not feel at all good about myself. My self-esteem was so negative, I allowed a playmate repeatedly to point his father's shotgun at me and pull the trigger. Each click was terrifying. Was it really empty? He made me watch him shoot birds out of a tree with his BB gun. This bullying felt awful. I brought very few friends into our home. This was because my mother's behavior with our family members could be erratic, unpredictable, sometimes violent, and even embarrassing. While our mother certainly tried her best to be a good parent, homemaker, art teacher, citizen, and wife, sometimes she needed to be placed against her will in a New York State psychiatric hospital. While she was away, I felt abandoned, alone, lost. But maybe in some way, I also felt safe. At age 4, while my brothers were in school and my mother taught art classes in her home studio, I went to another family for daycare. My mother knew these people and thought I would be safe there. However, when their 2 daughters, aged 12 and 15, returned home from school each day, I played with the 12-year-old. Behind closed doors, she enjoyed doing strange things with our bodies. This happened repeatedly, and I was very confused for many years. Of course, I was warned never to tell anyone about it, but I did blame myself for what happened. The effects of these strange experiences stayed with me for many years and made me feel shamed. In my 60s, I finally made a deliberate decision to forgive my perpetrator. I had learned some wise words. Forgiveness is a gift you can give yourself. Worth repeating, forgiveness is a gift you can give yourself. I also decided to give myself that same gift, realizing I should not be blaming myself. During my elementary school years, our mother would be hospitalized from 6 months to a year, each time her symptoms got in the way of meeting demands of life. While she was away from home, our father hired a succession of ladies to cook, clean, do laundry, shop for groceries, plus all other chores of homemaking from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. on weekdays. Occasionally, these substitute mothers needed to spank naughty little boys like me. One lady cried out when I came out of my father's dark closet, pointing his .22 caliber rifle at her and saying, "Stick 'em up." I never saw that woman or that rifle again. Another lady said, "Robbie's the best boy in the house. You be good boy, I give it you chocolate." We got along well. I was screaming out for his attention at home, in church, at play, and in school where I was bullied. Apart from getting frequent spankings, I remained the invisible child. Needs of the invisible child are ignored by mental health professionals because they focus all their attention on treating that child's parent, diagnosed with mental illness. In grades 5 and 6, a pack of boys waited after school to beat me up, even though I was bigger than any of them. I stayed inside helping my teacher by washing blackboards. By 7th grade, I was testing limits to the max, disrupting classes, and getting sent to the principal's office several times each week. Hanging out with other troubled boys outside of school, I was headed towards juvenile delinquency and possibly to reform school. My grandmother found a way to interrupt this cycle, pull me away from negative peer influences in my hometown, and stop my downward spiral. She identified a very good, academically focused military school. My 7th grade principal wrote a great letter of recommendation. Now, why do you think he did that? I owe both my grandmother and my parents a huge debt of gratitude because my older brother was in college at the same time. 5 years of military school transformed my life. Possibly, it may have saved my life. I found myself in terms of academics, discipline, persistence, and self-esteem as I began to figure out the true purpose of my life. Because stigma came along with my mother's psychiatric illness, I believe it was never revealed to anyone at my school. I never was diagnosed as a trauma survivor or received any treatment for it. Back in the 1950s and 1960s, there was no evidence-based, trauma-informed care as there is today. However, I benefited from nurturing relationships with teachers, my headmaster, and guidance counselor. For the first 2 years at military school, I was still raging like a bull in a china shop. Each afternoon, 7 days a week, rain or shine, or snow, my punishment for breaking rules was penalty tours. This meant marching back and forth, carrying a 10-pound U.S. Army rifle on my shoulders for 1 to 3 hours each time. Gradually, the number of penalty tours went down to 0. I learned how to be a good citizen of our 285-member Corps of Cadets. I became a leader, getting promoted up the ladder from private to first lieutenant. Eventually, I achieved a B+ average, getting accepted by 5 of 6 universities to which I applied. I became editor-in-chief of my school yearbook, and that yearbook earned the Medalist Award from Columbia University Scholastic Press Association. My faith has always been the rock I cling to as troubled waters swirl around me. Judy, you raise your hand, please. Judy has been my dearest wife and best friend for 50 years. In fact, our 50th wedding anniversary is next Friday, November 1st. She has listened actively to my stories, building up my self-esteem. Judy's love has provided support and affirmation. It is food for my soul. It is the air I breathe. I am thankful to my Creator who has given me such meaningful work to do. My higher power also sent scores of truly wonderful people into my life and into Compeer. Co-mentoring regularly with my best friend, J.D. Simpson, also a Compeer volunteer, matched since 1999, is my lifeline to wellness and recovery from traumatic lived experiences. I am a Compeer volunteer, matched up in friendships with 2 men, John and Joe. Keeping commitments allows me to walk the talk, doing exactly what I asked other volunteers to do for 40 years. In March 1991, John reached out as a friend to me, and I returned the favor. We became the first Compeer match in southeastern Pennsylvania. John helped me to assume the risk on behalf of my family to abandon my job search and begin a new Compeer program. With John's friendship and encouragement, I chose to start up Compeer Montgomery County from scratch. As you heard, 2019 has been a very horrible year for Joe. He told all about it. Joe's one brave guy, and I'm really thankful to have him as my friend. 3 times in my life, I made the best investment in myself. I went to regular psychotherapy for a few weeks to a few years each time. This professional help has given me additional resilience as an adult to cope with life's emotional challenges. My 23-year early work life, Army Corps, Army Signal Corps officer, Scout executive, and then volunteer coordinator, was my path into Compeer. Some people say I'm a social entrepreneur. That's a big word. What is that? Oxford Dictionary gives us this definition: a person who establishes an enterprise with the aim of solving social problems or effecting social change. In my case, I knew people with mental illness were at risk due to social isolation and loneliness. For lack of one good friend, their recovery was blocked. Did you know that loneliness now kills more people than smoking or obesity? It's an epidemic, but Compeer surely helps, and Compeer works. Back in the 1980s, I began to read about Compeer in my professional journals of volunteer administration. Compeer began in 1973 with the unfortunate name of Adopt a Patient. In 1984, the successful and renamed Compeer program began to spread around New York State. Compeer also expanded around the country and Canada. Right now, Compeer is also in Australia and England. The first few Pennsylvania programs started in 1984. Some of those are still operating. Here in southeastern Pennsylvania, Compeer first began in 1991, when my position as volunteer resources coordinator at Norristown State Hospital was suddenly abolished. Opportunity knocked, and God called me by name. In less than 24 hours, I knew what I would do. Immediately, I began to volunteer my time to starting up from scratch a new Compeer program to serve southeastern Pennsylvania. That initial 5-county vision proved too ambitious, so we decided to focus our attention on Montgomery County. An advisory board was formed early and trained by an outside consultant. He volunteered his services. Amazingly, the Montgomery County startup was done with no public funding at all until a sizable grant was received by Compeer. The very first donation of $100 were given by a church. $1,700 were donated in the first month after startup was announced. $10,000 more in the second month, and $10,000 more in the third month. Can you believe it? $21,700 given in 90 days. 7 months later, a family foundation gave Compeer a 3-year renewable grant of $148,600. That got the county's attention. 4 years later, they awarded Compeer a second 3-year grant of $165,500, which enabled Compeer of southeastern Pennsylvania to expand into Delaware County and to add a Compeer coordinator to the staff in Montgomery County. You may ask, why so much talk about money? Well, this is because having a broad base of secure funding sources is vital to keeping a Compeer program alive. Most programs that have failed did so due to a lack of funding. In 2013, the 2 counties served by Compeer of southeastern Pennsylvania boasted a robust number of matches. Sadly, Montgomery County Compeer suddenly closed its doors on June 30th, 2013, when $60,000 was taken away. This was a direct result of cost cutting by Pennsylvania Governor Tom Corbett. Corbett was the anti-Robin Hood. Rob from the poor and give to the rich. At that time, 5 other Pennsylvania Compeer programs ceased operations. We went from 13 to 7 Pennsylvania Compeer programs overnight. Happily, Compeer in Delaware County is still thriving. With us today is Program Director Olga, plus her Compeer coordinator, Jonathan, his wife, and 2 members of Olga's advisory board, Eric and Claire. Please stand for a warm Chester County welcome. Following a 14-month absence from Compeer, August of '97 to October of '98, I began right away to create a second new program from scratch here in Chester County. At the Aging Expo in Philadelphia, I approached 2 board members of the Mental Health Association, gave them my resume, and suggested they ask their CEO, Joe Rogers, to sponsor the new Chester County Compeer. I then met with Chester County Administrator of MHMR, Ed McConnell, in October of 1998 to request public funding. Ed told me he really wanted to do Compeer, but there was no money available. A few months later, I met with State Senator Jim Gerlach, obtaining his commitment to write a personal letter of Compeer support to Ed McConnell's boss, Jim Bruce. It was Senator Gerlach's own idea to write this letter, and it proved to be a very good one. On April 8, 1999, 7 months after I began this second startup process, commitments were made for Compeer Chester County to start up as a public-private partnership. Joe Rogers pledged $50,000 in private dollars, and Ed McConnell pledged $60,000 in public dollars. $10,000 extra because there were still 2 months left in the fiscal year, and they wanted me to start working on May 1st and not wait until July 1st. With no private fundraising, Compeer Chester County got $110,000 placed on the table that day. 20 years later, Chester County government remains very committed to funding Compeer. Private donors, including foundations, businesses, churches, and individuals, combine to make up the difference in Compeer's total budget. Compeer Chester County's advisory board was formed in July '99. This all-volunteer group still guides, supports, encourages, and helps our Compeer staff, Donna and Sherry. Happily, my life has been blessed with opportunities to create from scratch 2 nonprofit Compeer programs. These startups are the 2 peak experiences in my work life. Bucks and Montgomery County, plus Philadelphia, no longer have any Compeer programs. However, our 2 Compeer affiliates still serve 2 of 4 suburban Philadelphia counties. Our totally unique Compeer matches are proven to create connectedness, offering measurable outcomes for both match partners, such as overcoming feelings of social isolation, loneliness, and hopelessness. At today's luncheon, you and your friends had an opportunity to tell your personal stories. You told us how Compeering together has transformed both your lives positively. Do you know how your telling Compeer stories at this luncheon is the best way for our funders to hear live testimonies and learn how Compeer friendship transformed lives in a very natural way? For sure, your personal stories can move mountains. It's called anecdotal evidence. If you didn't get a chance to tell your story today, please ask Compeer staff to interview you and your friend for an article in Side by Side. They can write it up, or you can do it yourself. In conclusion, I would like to share some wise words from Alabama high school football coach Candy Geralds. Talking with his players before winning their first state championship game, Coach Gerald said, "Adversity is the crucible for greatness." Adversity is the crucible for greatness. He meant all their hard work at practices would pay off when they won the game. For us, it means when bad things happen to you, it can lead to creation of something new, like Compeer. That quotation and those words have been my story. They are also your story as we celebrate the 20-year anniversary of Compeer Chester County and the 28th anniversary for Compeer of suburban Philadelphia. Thank you for this opportunity to weave my recovery story into the history of Compeer in southeastern Pennsylvania. It has been my great honor. God bless.